Tell me what your life was like before you died.
So my near-death experience happened when I was about 7 or 8 years old. My parents were divorced. I lived with my mom, my brother, and my sister, and I would, say that it was typical of in the 70s what a divorced family would have felt like. But I knew that I was psychic even at a really early age, but I didn't really care. I mean, I knew things that would happen. I would see my family members when they were going to pass over. I would see their faces melting. And a few people in my family and people I knew that were much older were psychic. So I was familiar with it, but I was just a kid. I didn't really care about that necessarily. So when the near-death experience happened at a very young age, I mean, I knew right away what it was, but at 7 years old, it completely changed my life because even now I'm 57 years old. And when I think 50 years ago that this happened, once it happens, it can never not happen. You don't ever not remember it. I don't, it's just like it happened yesterday, even now. So it kind of set me up for living a life of really of gratitude, of feeling grateful and thankful, even as a really young kid, and that there was a bigger picture of everything. So that the way that my life ended up evolving, there were a lot of really scary, terrifying things that happened. But I think that the near-death experience happened so that I did get a big picture feeling at 7 years old. So, at that moment, I knew it was profound. It did change the way I thought about things, but I didn't until I was 10 and then 12 is when I really understood why it happened. But it's transformative. I've said to a couple people in the past that whether or not people have had near-death experiences, it's like one of the greatest gifts you could ever have. I mean, I feel bad that people have to die for a period of time to have it, but having it, and especially at a young age, it changes everything that you think. It changes how you feel about the world because you know that there's more than this. You know that there is a higher being. So even if you're religious, even if, I was Catholic going to church and I knew about God, but I was 7, I didn't really care about God, but I got it. I got that there was a big picture. And I remember after the near-death experience, like telling my family members about it. And they were in their 50s and 90s and 70s. And they're like, wait, what happened? It's just a life-changing, game-changer event. So I was at school. I was in the hot lunch line. It was, big long line, but it was me and two of my friends. And there was a freestanding record player, like on a metal stand. And we were right next to it. And we were going to play a game that who could hold their breath the longest. And there was, like I said, 3 of us. I was going to go last. I told them, I know that I'm going to beat you two. And I did go last. I did beat them because the next thing I knew, I was in the nurse's office so I passed out. I hit my head on the metal stand. I was in the nurse's office, but before I came to, I saw a white light and I saw a tunnel. And kind of like the classic story almost of what you hear about a near-death experience, but not a tunnel that was small, like big, but you felt like you knew that you were surrounded by something. So I was in a tunnel and I felt myself like going towards this white light, but not like I was walking, like I was being like shuffled or scooted forward, like just being pushed forward, but not me walking. And I saw this white light, but the thing that's notable and noticeable to say, it wasn't just a white light. I could hear music, and it was also white light, but with colors as well. And it was almost like, on 4th of July when you have a sparkler and it's, sizzling and sparkling, like crackling, like kind of sparkling too. But you just felt complete love. I mean, and I felt like I was embraced by it, and you felt like an enveloping of love, and you're not afraid. And I was scooted towards this white light, and I just felt like I was home. And at 7 years old, I don't even think I know what I would even say the definition of home was, but I felt like I was home. And then all of a sudden I was told that I had to go and that I was being scooted back, but I did not want to go. I wanted to stay. And I also knew that it was not in the same realm. I knew that I wasn't like in the consciousness realm. I knew I was in a different realm, and I felt like I knew that I had passed away, or that I was passing or about to pass, but I was told that no, now this was not your time. And then the next thing I know, I woke up. I was in the nurse's office. She was leaning over me and just saying what happened. And I didn't tell, like I said, my family members till a day or two later. And then when I realized what that was, and I realized then, but once I had that conversation, I felt like I went from 7 to like 30 immediately. I felt old. Even though I was still a kid and I was doing kid things, I wasn't afraid of anything. I mean, it's really such a gift. That stupid holding my breath in the lunch line was one of the best things that's ever happened to me in my whole life. It was really fabulous. And even now, when I talk to people and like you said, many people, the big question they have is, what is out there? What happens when we pass away? It altered my life, but I believe that the reason why that happened in hindsight now is because of all the things that were going to happen to me, so that I was brave enough and courageous enough to get through what I needed to. So I do think it happened for a real particular reason. I think that they thought that it was too much and it was overwhelming, and they didn't want me to be afraid that I had maybe, was about to die. But I wasn't afraid. I was the opposite of afraid. And I think that it only took a couple of days to tell them because, I was living with my mom, and my mom was not the stable one. My father was. So I didn't want to tell my mom right away because she was unstable. So I waited a day to talk to my father, who lived out of state, to tell him. He understood it. I think he was afraid that I thought it was too much. I don't think I did a good enough job at the time of explaining, no, this was fabulous. It was a great gift. He accepted that I went through it, but I think that he was trying to make me not afraid, but I wasn't afraid at all. I was the opposite of afraid. But when I turned 12 years, so one of the things that I did see when I was 10 was that there was a girl that was about 12 years old that she would be abducted. And I saw that there was a period of 3 days that she would be kidnapped, and then she would, be taken from her home, and that a lot of awful things would happen. So it ends up that 2 years later, that was me. I was abducted from my bedroom from two strangers. They kidnapped me in the middle of the night. It was over a 3-day period, and they put me in a car. They had duct tape in my eyes and my mouth, and I went in. So it ends up that it was 4 miles away from my home. The next day, when my mother realized that I wasn't home, she called the police and the FBI. And back then, it was 1979. As a child, as a minor, they didn't tell your name on TV. So they showed like my face, but they blanked it out. They didn't say my name. And so they had said that, here's this missing girl, and the FBI was at my mom's house. So that happened for a 3-day period. So when this was happening, I was like laying on a crack mattress. And so I had duct tape on my mouth and my eyes, and there was a Christian radio station on in this room, this bedroom that I was stuck in with these two guys, but they were having parties, and they would have this music on loud, but there was a Christian radio station on it. At one point, it kept saying, if you believe in God, ask God for whatever you need. God is here. God will listen. And here I am. I'm being, beaten, raped, drugged. And at this time, I didn't even know how long I had been there. It ended up that I was there for 3 days, but at that time, I didn't know, I had no concept of time. And I thought, okay, if there's a God, yeah, God, I could use you. If you're here, I need you right now. And so I got brave, and I took the duct tape off my eyes, and I saw that there was a window in the room, and that and it was in September, and that the window was up, and that the shears were like billowing. So I knew that the window was up, and I saw that there was a phone right next to the mattress that it was on. So I hurried up, I picked up the phone, and I called my mom, and the FBI got on the phone, and they said, listen, you've been gone for a few days. Tell us, look out the window, try to describe your surroundings. And so I did, but then I heard these, bad guys come back up the stairs. So I hung up the phone, put my tape back on my eyes. And then like about an hour later, whatever happened, they went back downstairs. I thought, I got to get myself out of this. They're going to kill me if I don't, and I realized then that I was going to get away because I was going to get away, not because the FBI was going to charge through the door and save me. I had to save myself. So I hurried up, I got dressed, I jumped out of a second-story window, and I broke my foot, but I hobbled over to the next door neighbor. And I remember like it happened yesterday. I mean, there was a young guy who was like in his 30s. He was lying underneath his Corvette working on it. So I can only see his legs. And I thought, oh, I hope I can get his attention. So I guess I was crying, and he came out from underneath the car, and he said, oh, are you the girl that's been on TV? And I said, yes. And we hurried up, and we went into his house, and he called 911, and the police and the FBI came. And so it ends up that they were caught. They did go to trial 6 months later. They were, both sentenced to 30 to 60 years in prison each. They served 26 years in prison. But at the time, when I was getting ready for my trial, the FBI agents that were in my house, so there were 2 FBI agents on the case, and they said to me, when I explained that, I kind of knew that this was going to happen. And that's why I had the nerve to jump out of the second-story window. And they're like, well, what do you mean? How did you know? And I kind of told them. And they said, listen, we actually have a couple other cases, like missing person cases we're working on. Can you help us? And at that point, I had never done anything psychically. I just knew things, but I never like gave anybody information. I said, well, I think I can, but I don't know how. And they said, well, we need help. So whatever you can do will be helpful. So then I said, all right, well, let's try it. And so they gave me a little bit of information. And at the moment, I don't think we all thought that I would start solving cases necessarily. We just thought, well, we'll see what happens. We'll see if I could help. And I actually, in that 6-month time, solved 2 cases for the FBI. So here I was preparing for my own trial. And then I was solving 2 cases for them. And that's just kind of how it evolved. And so from that point on, then 6 months later, they got, they went to jail, to prison, both of them. And so about a year later, I was 13 years old. So then I went and moved in with my father. And I said to him, listen, I need to know why this happened. Because even though, I got away and they went to prison and, everything's kind of okay, why would they pick me? And so my father showed me 2 New York Times articles. One of the kidnappers had escaped from a prison in Schenectady, New York, 7 months prior, and drove to where I was living in Michigan to come and kidnap me in particular. So it wasn't random. It was a setup. He was coming to get me. And so I said to my father, what? He escaped from prison? Because I didn't know that. At the time of the trial, when I was, testifying, I didn't have to be in the courtroom with them. So I got to testify. They were not in the courtroom. Then when they testified, I didn't have to be in there. So when my father told me a year later that, one of them was an escaped convict from prison, and I got really, really afraid. And I thought, because thinking it was random was less scary than knowing that somebody escaped from prison and drove all this way for 7 months and came and got me. And, and I was really, really terrified. So then here I was trying to live a normal kid life. I was 13, 14, 15 years old. I was, a cheerleader. I was doing, book reports, whatever normal kids do. But then the FBI were contacting me and asking me to help them solve cases on the side. I wasn't getting paid for it. Then the local police, I was doing that for them as well. And even one of my best friends in high school, I remember I went over to her house one day. We were just hanging out, and her father, who was like the local police detective, who I didn't know was my girlfriend's father, when we both saw each other in the kitchen, we had to act like we didn't know each other because I was helping him on local cases, but I didn't know that was his daughter. So we, because nobody knew that I was doing that except the people that knew. So when I graduated from high school, I thought, all right, I don't really want this life. Here I was like solving all these cases. I was a psychic, but I didn't really want to do that. So I moved to California because I thought I'm going to reinvent myself. I'm going to just, do something else.